Check Change Control. A message from the American Heart Association, the American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
Gallbladder problems, gingivitis, a bad back, indigestion, fatigue, low libido, not sleeping well, need to lose weight. Just some of the topics you'll hear about. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob Martin. Join me Sunday mornings at 10 on Talk 1470 WNN.
American Legion Post 142 reminds us that many veterans returning from service are in need of work. Many have elite military training and valuable professional skills that can benefit your company. This year, show your stripes. Hire smart and hire vets. From American Legion Post 142 in Pompano Beach, reminding everyone we live in the land of the free because of our brave. For information on hall rentals, memberships, or to donate your time, finances, and resources, call 954-942-2448. 954-942-2448. The members of American Legion Post 142 are on the air saying USA all the way.
Talk 1470 is WWNN Pompano Beach and 95.3 FM W237BD Boca Raton, the Health and Wealth Radio Network.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
This is Tanoa Lynn Poirier, and I want to welcome you to Comm-Unity Conversations on WNN 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. This show is about you. I want to hear your trials and triumphs, challenges and victories, and how you overcome obstacles every day in our dynamic industry. All callers are welcome to join Community Conversations. This is where we'll discuss all things in common. We'll discuss managers, directors, vendors, and owners. Let's elevate the conversation. Raise the bar. Start here, now. Hello, welcome to Friday. You're listening to Community Conversations with Tanoa. I'm your host, Tanoa Lynn Poirier, and as always, thank you for joining me. It's my pleasure to do this. I was out last week on what a friend of mine has coined my momcation. My mom and I take a girls' trip every year, and we pick a place we haven't been, and we went to New Mexico. If you haven't been, oh my gosh, please put that on your bucket list. I have not met a more friendly group of people everywhere we went, from Albuquerque to Santa Fe. Warm, engaging, generous people. So thank you, New Mexico. We're definitely going to come back, and we're probably going to bring some other girls with us. Thank you for hosting us and giving us a wonderful time. Now, you probably saw a show from October, I think, 27th with James Vilson. If you have not seen that show or listened to that recording, you can head over to my website, hellotanoa.com, where you'll see past shows, blogs, vlogs, information about me, speaking engagement, invitations, etc. And James is one of my heroes. He was raised by a single mom in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, without the benefit of all of the advantages we have here in this country, all the support systems. And so he is just a walking, talking kind of big deal as far as I'm concerned. So do yourself a favor. If you want to feel uplifted and positive and happy and hopeful, you will listen to James's story and what he's trying to do for other people based on his experience. It really is inspiring. And to find me, you can also listen and watch on facebook.com/HelloTanoa. You are currently listening on the radio to 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. Welcome in. The topic of our show today is the coarsening culture in community conversations. What's that? I'll say it again. The coarsening culture of community conversations. And I'm going to try and explain to you some incidents that I have experienced, because in order to be authentic, I've kind of have to talk to you about my experiences and maybe how I overcame those experiences, and perhaps they will be helpful to you. Now, I know that the culture seems to be coarsening writ large, kind of everywhere, that there are lots of divisions and disputations and difficulties with our close neighbors and our faraway neighbors. But I I think that it has filtered down to community associations, which, as you know, is the focus of this program. I am a community association management company owner, a community association manager, and I've been doing this for a while. I'm also an author on the subject. I wrote a book called 365 Tips, which you probably know about if you've listened to the show for any length of time. But what I'm trying to do is help you, while I'm helping myself, work through all of the difficulties with this career choice and with this management company. Because if we can work through those together, then it eases the burden a little bit. Wouldn't you agree? So I want to point out the kinds of people who are not candidates to live in community associations. And if you are considering, you are listening to this, or you're going to listen to this later, you are thinking about perhaps moving into a condominium, co-op, homeowner association, mobile home community, or purchasing a timeshare, I want you to know a few things about being an owner or resident in a community association, what you may not know if you live in a place where you are able to kind of maintain your home and your yard and garden in a way that you see fit. If you want to individualize your space inside and out, for example, you want to have a tan colored home with black shutters and a bright red door, or a teal or turquoise door, that is an individual option that is not available to you in community associations. If you want to completely remodel the inside of your home and kind of drill through ceilings and floors in a condominium, and change where the electricity comes in because you have some fancy ideas for a smart home and you want to kind of move the panel, that's not possible, because very often, in fact, I think always, in a condominium, you share a stack where there is the plumbing and the electricity, and you can't move that because it's going to negatively impact your neighbor above you and below you. So that's not something you can do. If you are the kind of person who wants to be the king or queen of their castle and make all of your decisions, living in a community association ain't for you. And that's okay. But you should know ahead of time that this is kind of a prohibitive situation for you. If you want to make the decisions about whether or not you fix the roof, whether or not you are going to keep your current landscaper or hire a painter, or all of the things that you choose for your home, all of the elements, components, appliances, etc., for your personal space, you have to surrender that ability, that privilege, in favor of lowering your maintenance, not having to worry about who's going to clean your pool, who's going to mow the lawn, whether or not the property gets mulched or snow plowed if you're in a different part of the country, when the trees get trimmed. Somebody else makes those decisions for you, but in exchange for making those decisions for you, you surrender a lot of your liberties. And so it's really important to know this going in, because I don't want you to be disappointed when you purchase in a community association and now you're mad. and then I hear about it, and then we have to work through some things. So those are the pros and cons of living in a community. And for managers, which is kind of the focus of this program, management companies, I want to point out why I feel that there seems to be a trickling down of the coarsening of the culture in community associations. People seem to be more free to be verbally and physically, frankly, abusive. And I want to tell you what has happened, what I have experienced, and then I want to offer you some solutions should these things happen to you. And I want to kind of start with people who call you on the phone and have a legitimate complaint, but their manner is so coarse that out of the gate, at the beginning of the phone call, they are profane and disrespectful and shouting. That is not something you have to accept. So you have a couple of options. You can slow the pace of your conversation, as I'm doing, and you can lower the tone of your voice and try to talk them through it. If they are continuing to be bombastic and profane and unreasonable, you just tell them that they are welcome to call you back when they get their act together, but in no way are you going to accept that kind of abuse and behavior from somebody that you want to serve. So I don't want you to feel badly about that. I don't want you to feel like you have failed. That person entered a conversation that they wanted to do battle with you. And I would say that no one has to accept that, particularly somebody who is willing to help as a manager in association. And I'll give you a quick example. And this is difficult because time goes so quickly. I had someone who was upset because another owner was getting the benefit of some upgrades and repairs that were needed because their particular association property had fallen into disrepair. The person on the phone was in pretty good shape, but they wanted something new because their next door neighbor was getting not really an upgrade, just bringing it back to the way it was supposed to be. And they were declined. And so their response was profanity and disrespect and kind of shouting. And so that is something that I know most managers experience. You don't have to put up with it, okay? So you can just invite them to leave the telephone call and tell them to call you back when they're ready to have a conversation and perhaps another look at the issue. I think that most people want just to be acknowledged. And if you can just go back and take another look and see whether or not they have a case, perhaps they do, but you don't have to hang on to that phone call. I was on vacation this past year, and I got a phone call from a very irate owner who had been verbally and physically abused. His neighbor had been kind of worked up and angry. It stemmed from something that had happened before. They literally physically assaulted he and his wife, and they called because they wanted the manager to offer a recourse. The manager's job is not to interfere in criminal and civil matters. What I would recommend if something like that happens in your community and they're looking to you, the manager, to help solve this problem, you have to direct them to call the police. They have to make a police report. If they are willing to kind of give an incident report in an email and ask them meticulously to point out times, names, actions, reactions, how long the incident lasted, because you're going to need to present that information to the board of directors so they can make a decision about what they're going to do. I also recommend that you contact the association attorney, let them know what has transpired on the property. You've got to make sure you report this kind of incident. If there was damage to the property, you want to make a report or just notify the insurance company that there may be a claim coming so that they're not surprised. But you have to kind of cover this whole gamut. But you're not qualified. You are not a law enforcement person. You're not an attorney. You're not a board member. And you're not one of the people who was actually assaulted. Encourage them to see this through to the end in terms of pressing charges, because the more people press charges against someone who is abusive to them, the less people will be inclined to exhibit this kind of behavior. The association's option is to, through the attorney, contact the person who was the alleged assaulter and tell them that it's not acceptable in that community. And if the incident is repeated, the association has recourse and will exercise that recourse. That does two things. It makes the association aware, it makes the owner aware, but it also demonstrates a compassion and an acknowledgement of something that has happened to somebody in their community that is very distressing and completely unacceptable. I'm sure you'll agree. So those are a couple of examples, and those are a couple of options in terms of something like this happening to you. Now, I will tell you that in the last 12 years, as I've been practicing this profession, I've never experienced that level of physical and verbal abuse. There were racial epithets thrown at these folks who are just minding their own business, and it really was quite unfortunate and very difficult. And so If you have not experienced it, well, you've heard here how you may want to approach that, particularly if you're a new manager. You are not prepared to deal with that, particularly if you're on vacation and, in a different country. You can instruct your staff how to perform. What I find generally, can we talk about this, is when neighbors are unhappy with one another and they're at a common amenity, a pool, a golf course, a tennis court, and there's alcohol involved, that the incidents tend to escalate out of control. What I'm noticing as the title of the show is The Coarsening of Culture and Community Associations, is that there used to be and I mean in the last couple of years, a kind of hands-off, mouth-off, if you will, some things that you just didn't say. There are words that would not be uttered in public. There seems to be a division happening with respect to political stripe or country of origin or area of the country where someone is from, that is kind of being used as a weapon in these alcohol-induced fights. And again, as a manager, somebody's going to come into you because they're at the pool. They're going to come into the office and say, you've got to come and break this up. No, you don't have to come and break it up. What you have to do is call 911. You are not qualified for that kind of dispute resolution. These are adults. They are conscious and aware of what they're doing, and you've got to call the police and let the police handle it, and they will. What you cannot do is take sides. It doesn't make any difference whether you have a particular affinity for one or the other person. You have to do your best to stay in the middle and just report the facts as you know them and let the authorities handle it. But as I noticed the coarsening of the culture, I noticed that there have been words and phrases that are now reintroduced into these kinds of incidents that are troubling and unacceptable. And I would say that after you have dealt with the issue, with the authorities, it is time to have a conversation with your boards about maybe rule revision, about if it's possible to ban a person from the pool for a time so that they can realize that their behavior is unacceptable. Now, there is a process for a due process, if you will. And if you're not watching, I made little hand quotes, air quotes, for infractions and associations. But there are some infractions that are so unreasonable that they're an immediate kind of punitive situation. And so if you are abusive at an amenity where other people are trying to enjoy, maybe that person needs a timeout. So talk to your attorney about those issues, discuss it with your board, and see if it's possible to cut them off for a 30-day period so that they cannot use the pool, the golf course, the cafe, the community center, and maybe that timeout will help them get, find themselves again. It's really distressing. And I will tell you that there's a peer pressure in these communities that tends to help people realize when they have stepped out of bounds. So I hope that is helpful to you. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me personally. And I may have mentioned this around the holidays, but sometimes when you are outside of the community in your own life, you're resuming your life because you actually do have one outside of the community, I hope. I had an owner in one of my communities verbally assault me in a drugstore for something that was completely out of context and had already been decided by the board, but they decided they did not like the verdict and wanted to take it out on me. Now, that is unreasonable in the extreme. So one, I'm not in the office. Two, I am just trying to conduct my life just as they are. And 3, I'm not a child, and so you can't treat me this way. Now, you have a couple of options. You can respond in kind, you can ignore, or you can try to instruct the person about how they are going to treat you. And, my mom says to me, and just said to me recently, we teach people how to treat us, right? So responding in kind for me is not an option. Ignoring is not possible in this situation, let's face it. So this is a time to teach this person how to treat me. And so very calmly, I explained to her that this is not the venue for this conversation, that the board had already rendered a decision, that it was not my decision, and at no time ever in the future, as long as she lived, would she ever talk to me this way again. Now, she had a few more words. She doesn't speak to me at all anymore, which is fine. But in no way is anybody permitted to treat me that way more than once. So I think you have to decide how you're going to respond, but you don't meet anger with anger. You meet anger with calm, rational, adult conversation with another adult who is behaving unreasonably. And if it gets to the place where they levy some kind of comment that is really outside of bounds in civil society, I think you have to address that as well. So if they're profane, if they're shouting, spitting, and being unreasonable, you just have to say, you know what, that's not going to fly. That is your right as a human being not to accept that. And generally, I will say that there's a small minority of people who feel compelled to behave in this way. And so if you are considering a career in community management, I don't want you to think at all that this is the lion's share of the people you're going to deal with. But in every job, career, vacation, resort, whatever it is you're doing, you're going to have a percentage of people who are difficult, and it's up to you how you respond. I want to touch on a subject that I think is super important. One of the words that people use when they have an objection, when they're angry, when they want to have an insult right away, is that they call someone, particularly in community associations. I don't really understand that why that is. And you may have heard this if you live in a condo. They'll call someone a condo commando or a condo Nazi. Or if they're unhappy with somebody, they'll call them a Nazi. That is a word that I want you to banish from your vocabulary. In no way should that word be used other than discussing a regime who was brutal and vile and horrid and murdered millions of people in the most disgusting, inhuman, unspeakable way. That is not a word that can be used to disagree with somebody. That word is bandied about with such regularity that I think there's a desensitization of the way we speak to each other that becomes more and more acceptable that I reject. And I want you to think about it. When people speak around you, don't let it fly. Don't let that word come out. And there are lots of other words that I won't use on this program. But it seems to be that in community associations in which I'm associated, the word Nazi gets bandied about. And I'm asking you that if this comes up, that you point out what that word means and that you demand an apology if it is levied at you, or if it's levied at someone you know, you really encourage them to apologize to the person whom they've used that word against. And any other word, and there are many that are offensive, but if we don't speak up, stand up, it's going to continue to get worse. And so if you're listening, I always, as you know, want to end on a positive note, because there are ways to flip the script, to turn these things around, to make them more positive, to make them teaching moments. And I think we're both in a time of, coarsening of the culture, and in a time of kind of reclaiming some things that we maybe thought were not possible. So I want to focus on the things that are possible. And I want to finish by saying, listen, practice kindness, would you? It is an easy thing to do, but I think it takes practice now. I believe that our compassion muscles are beginning to atrophy due to lack of use. And I heard a term recently that was, it's not new to me, but it struck me as I was kind of preparing for this program. It's called compassion fatigue. And that is when people are just kind of at the end of themselves and they continue to give, or feel, because there's, it feels like we are bombarded or there's a fire hose of information coming out of everywhere, television, books, radio, social media, and we're kind of fatigued. I want you to exercise that compassion muscle. Make it strong. Don't let it atrophy, because we need it. We need you. I need you. And I want you to practice kindness. And so the end of that was, I know, a little preachy, so forgive me, but I think we can do better. If you know better, you do better. And if you know people who are being hurt by someone else, I want you to step in and speak up. Okay? Would you do that for me? Thank you for being a guest, not being a guest, listening to me. I guess you are a guest if you're watching me. Listening to me on Fridays, it's my pleasure to speak to you every Friday. If you're thinking about living in an association, remember those pros and cons. If you are managing an association, you know that there are always better ways to react to people who are in difficult situations or being difficult with you. So chin up, exercise that compassion muscle, practice kindness, be a blessing to somebody today, and endeavor to persevere. It looks like we are at the end of the program again. Isn't it amazing how quickly this program goes? I'll see you next time. We'll have another great program, and it's my pleasure to speak with you. See you next time. Thanks a bunch. Bye. You have been listening to Community Conversation.